The monster ripped the control node from its spine and fell to its knees, crying. Not rage. Tears. What happened next stunned even the war-hardened. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The stench of ozone and burnt alloy filled the air as Mike Harper stepped through the cruiser's docking threshold, boots scraping against the grated floor. The Zinthari ship was vast, clinical, and humming with restrained violence. Its hull was plated in pulse-reactive armor, and yet it smelled like fear. Not Mike's, though. He'd long since traded fear for stubbornness. Years of patching together shattered relay cores and nursing dead satellites back to life had left him with a casual contempt for authority and a morbid curiosity for things people told him not to touch. The guards didn't speak as they led him toward the beast. Their faces were concealed by iridescent faceplates, but Mike didn't need to see their eyes to feel the tension. Their postures said enough. Backs straight, shoulders locked, weapons gripped just a little too tightly. When the airlock to the containment bay hissed open, even they took a reflexive step back. It was like walking into a furnace of barely suppressed instinct. The creature crouched in the center of the chamber, chained in a 6-point suspension rig that hovered a few inches off the floor. Its skin, if it could be called that, was a mass of overlapping scales and coarse, mineralized hide. The coloration shifted subtly in the dim blue light, as if the very notion of color recoiled from settling on it. Its breath was a thunderous rasp, as though even respiration required restraint from destruction. And those eyes, deep-set, animal, too aware, locked onto Mike the moment he stepped inside. The Queen watched from the upper gallery, her expression unreadable, carved from centuries of strategic detachment. She had seen empires crumble and planets bend to her will, but this was a test, a mechanic playing God. "Do not look it in the eyes," she repeated, her voice like a knife sliding across glass. "Do not speak. Do not touch it." "Yeah, I got the memo." Mike's hand tightened on his multi-tool, but his gaze didn't waver. He stared back. The creature tilted its head, not threatening, curious. Mike raised a brow. "You've got the look of something that's seen too many cages and not enough kindness." He took one step forward, ignoring the guard's hissed warnings. "I'm calling you Rusty." A blink, a subtle shift in posture. Not submission, but attention. Zale leaned forward, her fingers curled on the rail. For the first time in a long, long while, the beast had listened to someone else. The change began so quietly it might have been missed by anyone not paying attention. But Mike paid attention, not because he feared the beast, but because he refused to treat it like one. Every morning, he showed up in the repair bay slinging a new story. Sometimes it was about old Earth cars, the kind with combustion engines and character. Sometimes it was about his childhood dog, a half-deaf mutt named Diesel who used to chase school buses and sleep with one eye open. Rusty never answered, of course, but he listened. At first, his reactions were subtle, a lessening of that low, thunderous growl when Mike entered, a cock of the head when he made a joke. But then came the moment with the drone. A standard maintenance unit skittered from the ceiling, its hydraulics jittered from poor recalibration. It dropped a spanner from 3 meters up, and the clang rang out like a gunshot. Mike barely flinched, but the guards tensed, plasma rifles half raised before the echo even faded. They all turned to the beast, ready to shoot, to tranquilize, to do whatever was necessary to prevent bloodshed. But Rusty didn't leap at Mike. He leapt for him. The monster's body was a blur, impossibly fast for something so massive. He landed between the human and the falling tool, arms out, muscles coiled like steel cables drawn taut. His eyes swept the room. Threat assessment, defense posture, not rage, not chaos, purpose. Mike looked up from behind him, heart thudding, not with fear, but with realization. "You okay, big guy?" he asked, voice low. Rusty rumbled, a sound closer to a purr than a growl. That was when Queen Sail arrived. She didn't walk. She descended, cloaked in dignity and menace. Her silver features were drawn tight with fury, not just at what she saw, but what it meant. "You've tainted his programming," she said, voice brittle with restrained violence. "A weapon must obey. You don't give it identity. You don't give it names." Mike stood his ground, though his lip bled from where he'd bitten it during the fall. "You call it programming. I call it trust." She didn't argue. She acted. He was arrested on the spot. Guards seized him, wrists bound in quantum cuffs. As they dragged him down the corridor, Mike glanced back. Rusty hadn't moved. Not to follow Sail. Not to stop the guards. He sat at the edge of his containment field, massive shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the direction Mike had gone. And for the first time, when Zael barked his name, Beast, the creature did nothing at all. The brig was a cube of silence and recycled air, built not to punish but to erase. There were no windows, only cold alloys and a slit in the wall that hummed faintly with vibration when the ship spoke through its metal bones. Mike leaned against it anyway, elbows propped on his knees, whispering stories into a void that technically shouldn't have been able to listen. But something did. He didn't know if it was sound, scent, or something deeper, some resonant frequency of emotion. But he kept talking. Stories of backyard fireworks and fourth-grade science fairs. Of the day he nearly flunked high school because he spent all night rebuilding a toaster into a radio. He spoke of the way Diesel, his old dog, used to howl at passing ambulances and tuck his head under the couch during storms, as if the sky had personally offended him. And when his throat grew raw, he hummed, low, tuneless, persistent. On the third night, the ship trembled, not from jump drive calibration, but from something more primal. The sound of steel bending, the shriek of failing locks, the unmistakable crack of a stasis field rupturing under pressure it was never meant to withstand. The sirens began as a pulsing whine, then escalated into full-blown alerts. Somewhere down the corridor, plasma rifles were cocked, orders barked, boots pounded the floor. And then, stillness. Outside Mike's cell, the motion sensor blinked red. A shadow filled the hallway. Massive, hunched and silent. Rusty. No snarling, no growl. Just the low, rhythmic thump of his breath echoing off the metal. He didn't attack. Didn't destroy. He waited. The guards arrived in squads, weapons drawn, adrenaline rising. They shouted at the beast to back down, to submit. Rusty stayed still until the first rifle discharged. The plasma bolt hit just below his collarbone, searing into flesh that had survived nuclear flamethrowers. He staggered, not from pain, but disbelief. Then he bellowed, not with mindless rage, but with something closer to fury born of betrayal. The blast hadn't hurt him. What hurt was that someone dared to threaten the one creature who had dared to see him. He stepped in front of the brig door and roared, a sound so deep it shook the oxygen ducts loose in the ceiling. Mike was yanked from his cell in a flurry of orders and confusion. He emerged blinking into the light, bruised but whole. Rusty saw him and quieted immediately. Zael arrived moments later, her expression taut with rage barely contained by decorum. "You think this is control?" she spat. "No," Mike said, stepping closer to Rusty without fear. "This is respect." He turned to the Queen. His voice was cracked, but iron strong. "You programmed a monster. I gave a name to someone worth knowing." Zael's reply never came. Her silence was louder than any scream. The hangar was silent, but for the echo of footsteps and the measured thud of Rusty's weight behind Mike. Dozens lined the catwalks above. Zinthari officers, conquered delegates, techs frozen mid-task, all witnessing the impossible, the beast of Vardros walking away from its master. Not in chains, not under orders, just following a man with calloused hands and a half-zipped hoodie stained with coolant and time. Mike didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the creature's breath, hear the scraping of claw against steel in sync with his stride. Every step away from Queen Shale was a rejection, not of duty, but of ownership. Then came her voice, slicing through the silence like a lash. "You are bound to me!" Her hand snapped forward, fingers curled over the neural trigger embedded in her gauntlet. For a moment, it was as though the ship itself groaned with Rusty's scream. The creature staggered mid-stride, legs buckling under the invisible weight of synthetic obedience. His roar cracked bulkhead glass on Deck 7. His arms flailed toward his skull, clawing instinctively at the source of the pain, unable to locate the tether inside the reinforced plates of his upper spine. Mike turned, one step forward, steady. "Rusty," he said softly, firmly, "you don't belong to her. You never did." The words cut through something deeper than bone. With a guttural snarl of defiance, Rusty jammed a clawed hand between his shoulder blades and ripped. The neural node tore free with a wet crack, glinting in the air like a shard of a broken leash. It hit the floor, sparking weakly. The creature collapsed to one knee, body trembling not from pain, but liberation. His breathing slowed, his frame slackened. And then he wept. Tears, real, salt-heavy and hot, ran down his jagged cheekbones and onto the steel floor. No one spoke. No one moved. Mike laid a hand on his arm, skin against calloused, seared flesh. "You're free now, buddy." Rusty let out a low hum, not a growl, not a snarl. Something gentler, almost content. Months later, under the rust-red skies of Colorado, he watched squirrels scatter beneath solar panels he had been tasked to protect. His massive hands swatted gently at one as it tried to gnaw a wire. He missed, deliberately. A child's laughter rang from nearby. Another drawing was taped to the station's wall, crayon lines depicting a towering monster, a tiny man, and the words, "Rusty is our friend." No one feared him now. No one controlled him. They knew him not as a weapon or a beast or a relic of war. They knew his name. And that made all the difference.